In 2005, my family moved from the home that I grew up in. I never knew if it was for any particular reason, financial trouble, family issues, or anything like that. The house that we moved to was only about an hour away, but was very country. No stoplights at intersections, barely any paved roads, and more tractors on the road than I had ever seen before in my entire life. The house was a former daycare and has a very odd layout. Exit signs with floodlights above the doors and a lot of random open areas. I was around 14 or 15 when we moved in, had my own bedroom for the first time in my life, and was enrolled into the most southern country school that you can imagine. Literally the lowest graded public school in Texas. When we moved in, my brother and his small family, wife, son, and daughter, moved in with us. Due to financial issues on their part, it was to help them build up good credit. My father would also suffer a crippling injury at work and be disabled a couple years after moving in, causing more issues. My first few years were fun, coming home from school, playing games with my brother, teaching my nephew how to play and join us. Everything seemed normal, albeit with some high-tension moments. As to be expected with 7 people sharing a home, we had our share of fights. When my nephew was old enough to talk coherently, and my niece was learning her words, they began to wake up in the night screaming and crying. My sister-in-law was there to take care of them while my brother worked the night shift at his job. With my parents becoming annoyed at being woken up by crying almost every night, my sister-in-law told us that they were just having nightmares. My nephew said that there was a person watching them from the open door. He didn't like talking about it very much, so I was asked to play some games with him and try to get some more detail. He looked up to me at the time and wanted to be like me, and I'm told that he still does. I eventually got a brief description after many random games. No eyes, black like a shadow, and moves on all fours like a dog. There was also aggression from my dad to my brother, saying that he was being too loud when he was awake at night or going to work. I didn't ever notice any loud sounds at night and was only ever woken up by crying children. During summer, I got into the habit of staying up late and hanging out with my friends digitally. It was at this time that I did notice some sounds, a bump of a wall or a loud step, though what my dad got wrong was that he heard it in the hall. I heard it from the attic door, which is in the hall ceiling. It was poorly constructed up there and had 2 families' worth of belongings, so falling objects was not out of the question. This continued for many years, with my niece saying that she was scared of the dark man watching her. It increased in intensity, with them freaking out individually in separate rooms, independently of each other even during the day. Our German shepherds would guard them ferociously and growl at doorways from time to time. In time, my brother and his family moved out, and it all seemed to come to an end. Years later, my sister, still living with us, had a daughter. She's 6 now. Last year, she began to draw pictures, standard flowers, suns, fields, the usual. When she was asked to draw me, she drew me, but with an extra. There was a tall, long-limbed figure, all black with no eyes, just behind me. She would draw pictures of this figure that I first thought was Slender Man, though a 5-year-old who had not seen YouTube yet wouldn't know such a thing. She always slipped them under my door for me. When I asked why, she said it was because he was always watching me, always following me, that he crawled down from the attic and into my bedroom, and that he watched me from the cracks of doors. I put this aside for a while because kids are kind of creepy anyway, but maybe my other niece and nephew had told her. When I brought this story up to my friends, they said it was the scariest thing they had ever heard. One friend, who was much smarter than myself, pointed out that my brother's family had been gone for years and had almost no interaction with my niece aside from the age of 0 to 1, so she wouldn't have the same details that they did so long ago. Now I live with this attic man behind my shoulder, I guess. Although I don't believe that there's some kind of ghost or demon following me around, everyone else seems very unsettled that 3 out of these children, plus one of their friends, all say that there's a dark shadow man that crawls around this house. Driving home at 2 a.m. on the desolate back roads of the countryside had become second nature to me. The winding paths flanked by dense forests and open fields had always been something so familiar. That night, however, something felt off as I navigated the darkened route toward home. I first saw what I thought were headlights off in the distance, a pair of dim yellow lights peering over the hill ahead. At first I thought nothing of it. It wasn't unusual to see the occasional car on these roads, even at such a late hour. But as I continued, something strange became apparent. The car, which I thought was initially moving toward me, seemed stationary, perched just over the crest of the hill. I had begun to slow down as I was now becoming a little confused and more cautious. The car had been a considerable distance away when I first noticed it. By now it should have crested the hill and passed me. I waited, my car now almost idling in the still of the night, which made me a little nervous. 5 minutes seemed to drag by and each second felt longer than the last. No other cars, no houses, just the oppressive silence of the countryside and the persistent glow of what I thought were headlights. The situation grew increasingly eerie. What was a car doing parked on this lonely stretch of road in the dead of night? Unease settled in my stomach, but curiosity and the longing to just get home pushed me forward. I inched my car up the hill, the headlights growing blindingly bright as I approached. Then within a split second, and without any warning, the lights completely went out, and the entire road was plunged into an opaque darkness. Where this so-called car had been, a strange grayish haze hung in the air. It almost shimmered slightly, and at first I thought it was just my eyes adjusting to the black night. But as I blinked and focused, the sight remained. It was both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. I drove slowly through the spot where the car had been, the eerie glow now reflecting off my windshield. The entire experience felt surreal, otherworldly. I made it home safely that night, but the experience was lingering and I couldn't shake it. I tried to rationalize, but the logical explanations all fell short. Weeks passed and I avoided that route at night. The fear of encountering such a phenomenon again was gnawing at me. Then a couple months later came the night when I wasn't alone. My friend Tom and I were returning from a late-night fishing trip, the bed of my truck laden with our gear and a modest catch. We decided to take the same back road, the memory of that night's encounter a distant yet persistent discomfort. I hadn't told Tom about it. It seemed too bizarre to recount without sounding like I was crazy or maybe delusional. As we crested that familiar hill, the headlights, to my astonishment, appeared again, exactly where I had seen them before. I was shocked and felt like I was going mad. My heart pounded as I slowed down the truck. Tom noticed my tension and gave me a questioning glance. In his eyes, it was just another car passing, but I knew better. Just like before, the lights flared impossibly bright, and then just extinguished, leaving us once again in oppressive darkness. That same misty haze reappeared, hanging above the road like a phantom. Tom's gasp broke the silence, and I knew he saw it too. I still recall the look on his face, and it mirrored my own emotions in that moment. We drove on through, my nerves short-circuiting. Neither of us spoke a word in the moment, the silence between us a mutual understanding of what we didn't know. Needless to say, that was the last time I took that road at night. Tom and I spoke on it after the fact, trying to brainstorm and figure out what we saw. At least I knew now that I wasn't the only one. Now every time I drive those roads in daylight, I can't help but glance at that hill, half expecting to see something again, even with the blazing sun overhead. The memory to this day remains vivid, although Tom and I have decided to push it to the back of our minds in fear of speaking something into existence. I can't help but wonder, though, if they're out there right now on that road at night, just hovering, silently waiting, even if no one's there to see them. Or maybe someone else has seen them and feels just as crazy as I did. I was on a backcountry hiking trip with a couple of friends, deep in the heart of a rugged wilderness where cell service was non-existent. The only connection to the outside world was a satellite phone we kept for emergencies. It was the kind of trip we relished, days spent navigating through the dense woods, across rocky streams and up steep inclines, carrying everything we needed on our backs. By the fourth day, we had left any semblance of a marked trail far behind us. Our group of 5 had split into pairs, each navigating with compasses and topographic maps through terrain that had likely seen more elk and bear than human footprints. The days were exhausting but rewarding, and the nights under the star-studded sky were peaceful, punctuated only by the crackling of our campfire and the occasional calls of distant wildlife. But it was on that 4th night that everything took an odd turn. I woke up abruptly, disoriented in the darkness of our small tent. It took a moment for my senses to catch up with my racing heart. Beside me, my friend Sam was sitting upright, her silhouette barely discernible in the dim light filtering through the tent fabric. Her gaze was fixed, directly on me, unnervingly intense. The air inside the tent felt heavy, charged with a strange tension. That's when I heard it. A woman's voice, clear and melodious, drifting through the still night air. It was close, way too close for comfort, as though she stood just beyond the thin walls of our tent. My heart skipped a beat and I strained to make sense of what I was hearing. The song was haunting, but beautiful as it flowed across the night air, and the melody was unmistakably human, rising and falling with an eerie grace. I glanced at Sam, expecting her to react, but she remained motionless, her eyes still locked onto mine with a vacant expression that sent a chill through me. We were miles from any established trail, deep in the wilderness, so remote that even encountering another hiker was rare. The idea that anyone could be singing at night at such an hour and so close to our tents was beyond me. And yet there it was, echoing through the trees like a siren's call. As if suddenly awoken from a trance, Sam finally began to move as she unzipped the tent flap. A surge of panic shot through me, sharp and sudden. I grabbed her arm with a strength born of desperation. "No," I hissed in a stern whisper, pulling her back. "Are you crazy?" She turned to look at me, confusion clouding her features as if she just woke up from a dream. I shook my head and pinched the bridge of my nose, at a loss for words. We sat in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. And over a span of minutes, the song, as mysteriously as it had begun, faded off into the silence, leaving behind a chilling stillness that was almost more unsettling than its presence. Not even any sounds of wildlife or the wisping of the breeze through the trees. Nothing. Sam seemed extremely drained, and I had a headache creeping from the back of my head after such an anxiety-ridden state. We remained huddled together in the tent, as though the fabric offered some measure of protection against what's out there. When the rest of our group finally emerged from their tents, bleary-eyed and oblivious to the night's disturbance, we found ourselves at a loss for words. Throughout the remainder of our journey, We were more alert than normal, half expecting the haunting song to return. But the days passed without another incident, and soon the strange events of that night began to feel like a distant nightmare. A couple years have passed since then, but the memory lingers on, a ghostly echo in the corners of my mind. I've shared the story with others, hoping for answers or at least something, but no one's been able to offer anything more than speculation. There are some nights when the wind whispers in the branches outside my window. I find myself listening, half expecting to hear that haunting melody once more. And though I have returned to the wilderness many times since, I don't dare speak of it when out there, and I try my best to distract my wandering thoughts, at least until she sings again.